Hello. Okay. I am here. I'm live. And in a minute, hopefully, I will be joined by Jen J, and I will let her introduce herself when she gets here. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 paths to healthy habits and optimal wellness with core, breath, and brain. There's Jen. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm just getting in from a family holiday celebration, so we're just getting settled here.
Well, fun. That's exciting.
Yes, yes, and it's great actually because we won't see that family for another month or so. So it was really good timing that we were able to pull it all together. So it's good.
Perfect. Well, I was just kind of introducing that we're going to do core, breath, and brain, the 3 paths to healthy habits and optimal wellness. And I will let you introduce yourself.
For sure, yeah. All right. So welcome everybody. I am Jen Jodoin. Everybody butchers my last name, so we'll just say Jen J. I am a women's hormone health coach and a holistic nutritionist, and I specialize in helping exhausted women recharge their batteries by boosting their metabolism and their energy levels. Hi. um, and women who are struggling with hormonal imbalances like difficult or resistant weight, as well as mood swings, overwhelm, and menstrual disorders, to just balance their hormones through holistic approaches of nutrition and lifestyle so that they can live confidently, comfortably, and happily through all stages of womanhood. And I got started on this path through my own personal journey of hormonal imbalances and just realizing that there is a lot more that we can take responsibility for in our health and our lives than we've been taught. And unfortunately, most of us aren't taught a whole lot about our hormones and our health, besides, the grade 5 health class that we took that was really designed to keep us from getting pregnant. And, most of us in this space, that's what we want. We want to get pregnant. And so it really comes down to having healthy hormones.
Well, I love so much of what you said too, because I think like as women, we can all relate because even me as pregnancy and postpartum corrective exercise specialist, it's the same kind of thing. Like I want to help women feel strong and confident, physically, which pairs really nicely with some of the stuff you're talking about. And even with lifting, like there are things to pay attention to in certain parts of the phases and with your hormones and then also when you mentioned um, it not being taught, it's the same thing. Like I was in this field for I think 9 years when I had for my first baby, and I didn't know any of this. And I went to college for it. I have a really high level certification, which means that if I didn't know it, so many women are missing out on all this information. And even the hormone stuff, like that barely gets touched on in the fitness world, but it is such a important factor. And I think that we all kind of need to understand that we're all going through the same thing. There are different phases to understand, and so much of what you said I think is relatable for women in general. That we just don't get the help that we need the way we need it in any aspect.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And one of my favorite things to say to women is, what you're experiencing might be common because, you have it or you've experienced it, your friends, your family, your sister, your mom, your grandma, but that doesn't make it normal. It is not normal for us to be exhausted all the time. It is not normal to have difficulty losing excess fat on the body. It is not normal to be so stressed out and overwhelmed that you can't think straight and you can't enjoy being a mother, which
Yes.
I know 100% is where a lot of moms are sitting right now thinking like, I feel so guilty because I want to love this journey and I struggle to do it.
Yep. I say the same thing about leaking. It is very, very common, but it is not normal. So
Yes,
there's
yes,
so much connection there.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So with that connection, which is kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit today, do you want to talk about identifying those basic like health habits, and you can start with that?
Yeah, for sure. What, honey? Sorry, I'm hungry. Go and grab some fruit. We just did groceries. Go grab some fruit. Okay. Yes. Okay, great. So I think one of the biggest things a lot of us misinterpret, or I almost want to say overlook, is how actually important a healthy lifestyle is. And we hear it all the time. Eat healthy whole foods, move your body, get lots of sleep. And we hear it so often that we're like, yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. Yeah, I'm doing that. But really, when we have a look at what we're actually doing day in and day out, is we're not really committing to those very level basics of good health, of actually getting 7 to 9 hours of high quality sleep every night. We are not moving our bodies intentionally every single day at the bare minimum of just walking 30 to 60 minutes a day. We're not, eating 3 whole food meals every single day. We're not doing it. And despite our best efforts, it's not because we don't know we shouldn't be. It's just really that life is really busy. Yeah, and it's hard. It can be so hard to actually just do it, right? And so when we pass those off as saying, yeah, I'm doing them, or I'm trying, or it's really hard and I can't, we overlook how important every little process and step is in doing that ideal healthy lifestyle. And, I shared this actually yesterday in my stories, that the results that we're looking for in our day-to-day lives of good health, good energy, sleeping well, feeling well, having healthy thought processes and mood stability and all of that, is that it's not built on one specific action. It's really actually built on a whole lot of tiny little actions that we continuously build up on. I almost think of it as Lego blocks. And so when we're overlooking the importance of those tiny micro commitments that we make to ourselves, like this morning, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go for a 15-minute walk, I'm going to come back and I'm going to make myself a balanced breakfast. If you just spent, that's 30 minutes in your day, 15-minute walk, 15-minute breakfast. If you spent that 30 minutes, you are creating a really good cycle for yourself. And what you'll find is this is going to allow you the time, energy, and space in your brain capacity to build onto that. And so when we kind of overlook the simplicity of that, or we overcomplicate it, that's when we're literally saying, oh, I can't do it. It's too hard. I can't stick to it, or I'm falling off track. Right.
Yeah, and I love that, because even in the fitness world too, and even going for the walk or eating the balanced breakfast or even trying to think about your hormones, so many people want that quick fix. And so many people want to rush through things. So what I see all the time in fitness is we're immediately trying to master the big movements like the squat, or even some of the CrossFit movements that you see, or the Olympic lifts. But you just need to take the 5 minutes to practice your breathing. Or like you said, just go for a walk. Something that your body at this point in time can tolerate.
Yes.
And your mental aspect can tolerate. I think when we try and go, even dieting doesn't work because it's all or nothing. And so you reach a point where mentally you can't do that anymore. You have and so it just all comes crashing down. And I think especially for new moms, postpartum moms, in the fitness world, everybody's like, well, if I spend 15 minutes just breathing, I'm not getting a workout. My body, I'm not getting stronger. But in reality, not only are you helping decrease your stress, improving your sleep, you're increasing oxygen and blood flow, but you're also strengthening your pelvic floor and your core. And when you're 90 and you have a strong pelvic floor and a strong core, because you were practicing breathing in your 20s and your 30s, you're going to not need the Depends. You're going to not need, the help getting out of the chair. So you need to have that foundation, and you need to start small. So if you want to do the big Olympic lifts, I am here for it, but let's progress you there first so that when you get to a 200-pound squat, your whole body doesn't come crashing down because it doesn't have the support that it needs underneath. And it's like so much that little step at a time. Master the breathing, schedule it. Just like you said, do the 15-minute walk first thing in the morning. Schedule it like a doctor's appointment. Make it just as important. And start with breathing. It's a small thing. 5 or 6 deep breaths, properly done, where you're thinking about lifting your pelvic floor, you're tightening that core, and you're really trying to strengthen. After you do that for 3 weeks, maybe, that's all it takes, then you might go, oh, I actually do have a little bit more than 5 minutes. What can I add? And then that addition becomes really great. And so I'm sure you can kind of talk about that a little bit with how you create those future habits and stuff. But you get into those little things, and then before you know it, it's like rolling a snowball. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes, that's exactly how I describe it. And you actually touched on a couple of things that I would like to piggyback onto, and that is that, when we're looking at how do the basics help us get to our end goal, like how does breathing help us lift heavier? How does it, if I'm just breathing, am I actually really doing anything for myself? Well, let me just tell you, 80% of our calories are burned just by breathing and metabolic processes in your body. Just your brain thinking, your digestion, all of that is about 80% of your calories. So yeah, you are working out your body when you are properly breathing. Like, it is literally that simple. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that with our hormones, like our sleep hormones, our stress hormones, our insulin hormones, and even like our menstrual cycle hormones, when we actually have lower cortisol levels in the body, we are allowing our body to reset from high chronic stress. And high chronic stress is one of the leading drivers for most women, or for a lot of women, to other hormonal imbalances. So things like sleep disturbances, menstrual disorders, high pain in the body, digestive issues, high stress, like the way your stress presents itself during the day, all of that can often be made worse by high cortisol levels. So yeah, you can literally be making a huge snowball change in several areas of your life by simplifying to one habit, like just learning to breathe deeply.
Yeah, and I think too, like with the breath and stuff, like you get the benefits of strengthening the core and the pelvic floor, and you're learning to connect to those muscles a little bit more, and you can see then, oh, why does this hurt when I'm feeling this way? Oh, I can't do the breathing exercise because I just yelled at my kid. So you can start to make those connections of how those things are presenting, or those hormonal dysfunctions are showing up, because you're taking that minute to tune in, to connect.
Yes.
And for a lot of women, we don't connect to our pelvic floor the way we're supposed to, because it's a traumatic area. It's a vulnerable area. And so if you take the time to connect to that, then all of a sudden you have this clarity of what might be off that you didn't know before.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Like, being in tune with our bodies as women especially is so much more important than maybe for a man. Like, we have different internal clocks that we run by than a man does. A man, runs off of a 24-hour clock, his circadian rhythm, and basically that's all. And, decade to decade, there's some shifts and changes, but a woman is not only changing day to day with her circadian rhythm, but she has an infradian rhythm. And this is the rhythm of your body that is dictated by your sex hormones and your menstrual cycle. And if you are not in tune with the way that your body feels and what it needs in the rhythm of those changes, you can feel a lot of disconnect and a lot of discomfort, like a lot more pain, a lot more food cravings, a lot less confidence even. And so you'll see that these sort of disconnects will actually perpetuate a lot of discomfort in all areas of your life. So being connected to the way that you feel in your body and being in tune with it is so crucial to really starting to understand what it needs and how you can support it, because who wants to spend time investing in habits that aren't going to work for you?
Right. Exactly. You
Yeah.
know, and I think to an extent we've kind of all already done that, and we know they don't work, but we can't seem to overcome that maybe, or and I think the other thing too that you find a lot is sometimes that just happens because we just go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next.
Yes.
But if you can take that minute to slow down and again come back to strengthening the pelvic floor and strengthening the core while you're taking that minute to just chill, then you're not as from one thing to the next. And so you can kind of go, oh, maybe this is not helpful for me.
Yep. 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 I love that. And, leading into what we were about to talk about is, developing those habits and how that actually works is that, our brain basically, let me tell you, as advanced a species as we are so very biological and so archaic in nature, the way our bodies respond and behave. And what I mean by that is our brains and our bodies still technically behave like cavemen and cavewomen. Like we are, our fight or flight response will kick in at any perceived stress. So that could be as simple as losing your keys. Your body will respond the same way to losing your car keys as it would if you were being chased by a tiger. So in that sense, our bodies are still very archaic and biological. But the good thing about that is that our brain is basically always seeking one of two things. It's always either seeking pleasure or it's always moving away from pain. And so what that means when we are building habits is that we are always going to look for the path of least resistance. What is going to be the most easiest for our brain to comprehend, to understand, to enact or put into motion, and for you to commit to. And so when we're creating habits, that's why it's so important to go back to what is the most simple thing that you can do right here and right now, because that is going to be where your brain's like, oh, I could do this. This is so easy. And what happens is the easier it is, the simpler it is, the quicker those habit neurons will actually connect and create what I refer to as a path of least resistance in your brain wiring, whereby that becomes your automatic response. And what we want with habits is an automatic response. We don't want to have to think about all the time what we're going to eat today, having to do this and having to do that, because we already have a high mental load of everything else we have to do, all our responsibilities as human beings, right? And so if you're creating new habits, we really want to come back to, well, how can I get my brain to go like this with it, to make it instant and automatic? And it's always going to be those two pathways. We're either going to look for pleasure and we're going to run to it, or we're going to be running away from pain. And pain doesn't always mean physical pain. It could mean discomfort. It could mean uncomfortability. It could mean, for example, if you're sitting on the couch and you're saying to yourself, I really need to get some movement in today, but I also really want to watch a TV show, the TV show is going to win 100% times over, because to your brain, it sounds really hard to get up and do movement.
Right.
So when we can simplify it and be like, well, why can't I do both? Do your workout while you're watching the show, right? Or same thing with your breathing even. Like you want to watch your show, you want to relax or unwind, or maybe you're cooking supper, but you're trying to sit this in. Well, how can you fit it in? Well, let's come back to where it's the most easy to do, the most simple, and where your brain is either going to look for pleasure from it or avoid the pain of not doing it.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the fight or flight. I think that a lot of women don't realize that they can kind of be chronically stuck in that negative space as well. So it's not just losing your keys. You can kind of be always in that state of you're so stressed out that you are always, your body is always cranking out that response for you in order to cope. And then also too, like the breath, like you said, the caveman, you know, our bodies, or the easiest way to get there. Like, so the same thing happens in the gym. You know, we still like to just keep those movements simple and what's necessary for life. So overcomplicating your workouts is not actually going to get you anywhere. You need to have just your foundational movements, and then maybe for a little bit of excitement and variation, you can change those up. But it doesn't need to be like what you see on CrossFit Games, or it doesn't need to be this over intense thing. And your body does the same thing physically. It finds the easiest path to get there as well. So you're going to start to compensate if your core is weak. You know, I had debilitating back pain after my second child because I didn't have the strength in my core I needed. And if you jump right into that squat, those heavy squats, without strengthening that core, you are at some point going to break down because those compensations can't help you forever.
100%.
And so coming back to like, and that's why I think for women especially, breathing is so important, because it does lay that foundation from the pelvic floor, from the core, from the inside. And then once that's good and solid, you can build on that very easily.
Yeah. I love that you say that from the inside, because even when I'm teaching in my nutrition practice, I'm always teaching from the inside out. Because everything that we see on the exterior of our bodies and everything we experience is a reflection of something going on inside. So rather than treating these surface level complaints that we experience of what we're perceiving, let's really have a look inside and figure out what is going on, what is the root cause of this, and how can we go from the inside out? Because oftentimes all these surface level problems are usually linked to one or two internal problems. So when we can fix one or two internal problems, we're fixing like 10 other external issues. And so it's incredible to be able to come from it with that, you know, that mindset of let's go from the inside out, and let's watch it ripple, right? It's like throwing a rock in a calm river and just watching those ripples. They get bigger, there's more of them, and it's exciting to see, because when you experience that in your health, and that rock, just to give you like some perspective, that rock could be one simple habit. It could be one tiny change in your life, such as learning to breathe properly and actually activating all of your core and your pelvic floor, and you will see this ripple through the rest of your health.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, like for me personally, like physically, same thing. I got a stronger core, and my back and my hip stopped hurting. And my hip was hurting, you know, prior to either pregnancy. That was a problem I just had before I even had kids. And then the back pain was definitely due to the pregnancy. But as soon as I strengthened my core and focused on different kinds of breathing and really like focusing and turning into my core and my pelvic floor, all of that pain just kind of slowly disappeared as I kept working. And I'm way more conscious of how I'm moving throughout the day, what I feel when I'm moving, and even what I feel physically when I'm upset.
Yes.
And like really being able to look inward and see that those changes are happening, or what's happening to me physically when I'm emotional or whatever.
I love that. Yeah, because like you said, like a lot of us live in this chronic, elevated, heightened stress response. And you're right, most of us aren't aware of it. For me, myself, I had no clue that I was until about 5 years ago. And it was, at that point, it was the last, I would say, item on my agenda of balancing my hormones, where I had gotten to a point where I had done everything else I could do, but I still wasn't seeing all the results I was looking for, or what I knew was possible, right? And especially having gone through my journey of balancing my hormones and experiencing so much relief, that I realized that our bodies are capable of incredible healing when you give it the right environment. And so I knew that there was a missing component in my journey, and it was the stress component. It was that I was literally living in this chronic fight or flight state, and it made me this miserable, awful person. Like, I'd wake up in the morning super angry, you know, flip of a switch. I could wake up happy, but you say one wrong thing, or you move too fast, or you put the wrong music on, and I was just an awful person, just like that. And it was passive aggressive, and it was gross, and I lived with a lot of guilt, you know, several hours later when I'm decompressing or I'm driving to work thinking, like, why did I do that? Why was I behave like, what is this, right? And that was the final component where I realized, you know, of course, with more education and experience, where I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is a fight or flight response, and this is how I've been living for over a decade, and I had no clue. Right. No clue, right? And so you're right, and I think a lot of moms live in that heightened state because there is such a high level of pressure and so much constant input coming into you as a mom. You know, taking care of other people is a huge responsibility, and it's not to say that dads don't have high level responsibility as well. I think that women take it on differently than men do, and because we have a different hormonal cycle than men do, we respond differently to it. And so that makes us more susceptible to being in that highly elevated state. And, you know, one of the things about that state is we don't think clearly. We also don't create habits. We're not rational in that state. We don't have good memory. So, you know, like, you know, when moms say like, oh, my brain fog's awful. I thought my baby brain would go away after baby, but it's gotten worse. Yeah, yeah, it has. It definitely has. You have lack of sleep. You've got high cortisol levels. You're dysregulated. You know, like you have all these emotional draws happening that you're not refueling and filling, right? And so it can be almost impossible for most women to actually create a new habit when they're in that state. So regulating that state, and biological, here we go again, it's from breathing.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say too, yeah, I mean, I think physically, same thing. Like, you develop bad habits. So when you're, you know, you think about when you're pregnant and you're at 30 plus weeks, your pelvis is spilling forward, your back is overarched, and you're like that for a while because you kind of have to be. And then after you have the baby, most women don't go back. They stay with that pelvis tip forward and the major arch in their back. And so you kind of have to come back to the basics to, one, break the habit, and two, create that new habit and teach those muscles what they're supposed to be doing again. And you're working to rewire some of the things that I mean, 40 weeks is a long time.
It is.
And you're gradually working towards the really bad extreme end, because obviously not until the baby's much bigger and you're near the end. But each day, you're spending that whole day wiring this new path, and it's going to work as you go on, and you're going to have to figure out how to come back to that original homeostasis and come back to your neutral. And that might take some time, and breathing is a great place to start because you can actually feel what's working and what's not. It gives your body a chance to come back and go, oh, this is what you're asking from me. This is what I'm required to do. I'm not pregnant anymore, you know, and it does give you that moment of relaxation as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I almost think of it as a hill, right? So like, I think a lot of us, we look at pregnancy as a downward slope where we start at the top and we're going downhill until baby's born. And then, you know, we're coasting, right? And I actually think of it differently, as in we're at the bottom of a hill at the beginning of our pregnancy, and our baby is born at the peak. And then we actually have to come back down on this other side by reversing everything that happened in those first 40 weeks. And you know, with really good habits and intention, you might be able to do that on a 40-week span, right? But that's really tough to do for a lot of women when we're now caring for, you know, a new human being, and we're sleep deprived and we've got all these extra responsibilities. But, you know, when we think of it that in that sense, we've got this 40-week climb. Well, now you're going to have at least a 40-week descent in which we have to undo that whole climb that we did in order to come back to where you started before pregnancy, which may not even have been in the healthiest place to begin with.
Right. Yes. And that's key too. Like I said, you know, I had hip pain prior to pregnancy because of a weak core, and I didn't even know it. You know, I thought that was just, I didn't even think about my core being a connection there. I also think too that I love the hill analogy, and I'm gonna have to start stealing that. But
go ahead, by all means.
You know, I think what society tells us is you get to that peak, and you should just be right where you were before. There is no down, there is no reversal. But you're exactly right that if you're doing all the exact right things, ideally, it should take the same amount of time to reverse the process. Obviously, in motherhood, there's other factors like
nothing's ideal.
Right. Sleep is a big thing because your baby's not sleeping, you know, so that's tough. But that can kind of extend that 40 weeks a little bit. But I do think so much of it is like your baby clothes or your pre-pregnancy clothes should fit 3 weeks later. You should come home from the hospital and not look like you had a baby. You know, you shouldn't have back pain. You shouldn't be leaking. Not, you know, or, oh, well, you're going to leak forever. Good luck coughing from now on.
Oh, yeah. I get that all the time. Yep.
It's just like this joke now, or you feel this pressure to go right back.
Conform. Yep. Yeah.
So it's either like you go right back or it's a big joke. And in reality, nobody is giving themselves the grace or the time to reverse it. And it takes a little bit of work that either we're not aware of what the work should be, or we're not willing to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I always say to the women that I'm working with too, is that there are different phases of our lives where we are ready to commit to different actions and steps, right? And so this is one of the reasons why I love breathing, because it's something we already do unconsciously. And so really all that you're asking is just, let's just be a little conscious of it for a little bit of time each day. And so we're not really changing your routine. We're not doing this whole upheaval of your life, because let's face it, like if you've just had a baby, your life is already turned upside down 6 times over. Like it's not the same as it used to be, especially if you've got more than one children, right? Or one child. So it's a really great way to actually take something very simple, very impactful, and just take what you're already doing and let's just elevate it a little bit. Let's put you into a place where you're being intentional without overwhelming you. And so I love that, because it really does allow women who are maybe in a phase where they're not ready to commit to their nutrition or their body movement or high levels of quality sleep, and they're not in those phases. But this is something that you could commit to at any phase of your journey. And so it makes it very simple, so that when you move into a phase where you're ready, your body's primed. It's like, it's ready to go. It's going, what do you got for me? Bring it on.
Yeah. And on that note too, you might be ready in pregnancy to be practicing it. And then it's going to make labor easier. It's going to make postpartum recovery easier because of what you just said. You're primed. So you can commit during pregnancy knowing that you may not be able to recommit once baby's born, but you are going to have that leg up because you were working on it when you had the mental capacity, when you had the space to do so. And you may take a break and you may regress a tiny bit, but if you put yourself here by doing those things in pregnancy and you regress a little bit, you're not coming all the way down.
Yeah.
You're still going to be up a little. So you can find those places to do it. And like you said, just being conscious of it. I'm not asking you to like think about your breath every day, all day. Take 5 minutes when you wake up, maybe 5 minutes before bed if you want better sleep. To just kind of be like, do I breathe into my shoulders? That's not good. Is that why my shoulders hurt all the time? You know, am I kind of, instead of taking like better breaths, you know, and just start there. Just think about what you do when you're standing at the sink. Is it all like this? Okay, well then maybe I need to think about more into my sides and my back. You know, you don't even have to do the practice of the breath yet. You can start by just paying attention to what you're doing one moment of your day.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I love that because it does start with a level of awareness. Like we do have to be aware of what we are doing correctly and what we're not doing correctly so that we know where the gap is and we know where we need to spend that time. Because, you know, like I said, like nobody wants to be spending time and energy on an activity that's not going to work for them. So the level of awareness is like their first step for sure. But so you just gave some really good like indicators of how we should be kind of thinking about breathing. What are some, you know, tips and strategies, or even just like what does proper breathing look like? Like what should we be really looking for?
Yeah, so I like to use a zipper, like you're zipping up a jacket as a good example. So the breath should come, as you exhale, it should come from your pelvic floor. So you're thinking about lifting the pelvic floor first. So if you think of the zipper, lifting your pelvic floor is kind of when you make that first connection at the bottom of the zipper. And then as you exhale, your corset abs or your deep core or your TVA, whatever you want to call them, they shape like a corset, and that's kind of how it should feel, start to tighten. And that's when the zipper comes up. You think about the jacket getting closer together and everything kind of tightening up. And then as you get even higher, the shoulders now come down and in a little bit so that the jacket can close in that zipper. And so you lift from the pelvic floor, you tighten the core, and then your ribs should come down and back a little bit as you go through that exhale. So now your zipper's fully closed and everything is super tight and compact between your ribs and your hips. And then as you inhale, you're thinking about releasing that zipper. So you're breathing into the chest, you're breathing into your sides, into your back, so 360. And then as the zipper comes back down, a little bit of tension can be released from the core, and you're relaxing that pelvic floor. So now the jacket is open and loose, and everything feels good and flowy. And then you tighten the jacket back up, and everything becomes more compact and tight again.
Okay, cool. So, okay, this is a really neat analogy because I've never heard of it described that way. So oftentimes when I hear somebody saying like engage your pelvic floor and your core, like I'm thinking like Kegels. This is like the first thing that I think comes to most women's minds. So is this like the accurate beginning position of what we're doing with our pelvic floor?
Yes. So as you start the exhale, you can totally think about it like a Kegel. Kegels, I are not my favorite because for some women who have tight pelvic floors, it's going to make things worse.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So the component of breathing that's important to counter that is the inhale. So yes, you can think about the Kegel like you're lifting. So, you know, I think a lot of times when people describe Kegels, it's you're lifting the elevator floor.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how your exhale should happen to start. You kind of lift that elevator, you do that Kegel, but you want to be able to make sure that you can relax the pelvic floor completely on your inhale. So for somebody who has a tight pelvic floor where Kegels might make things worse, you are going to be able to counter that by making sure that you can learn how to relax your pelvic floor. So a lot of times I'll tell people to not worry so much about the 360 breathing at first, if that's difficult to get the rib cage moving and all of that, or if you're really having problems with your pelvic floor like leaking or prolapse, then I tell people to fill your pelvis with your air. So it's kind of this visual of like trying to bring the air down into your hips, and that can help you relax your pelvic floor. Also, sitting on a stability ball can actually give you a lot of feedback. So you can kind of feel the pressure down on the stability ball as you inhale. So you do start the exhale like a Kegel, but then you need to be able to make sure that you can relax and open that pelvic floor on your inhale.
Cool. That's so cool. Now, I'm like, my wheels are turning. I'm like, I need to try this all again because now I'm like curious. Like, am I actually doing this? So, in an ideal world, should we be breathing like this all the time? Should that be like our natural breath?
No, not necessarily. But what it will help you do is I kind of touched on it a little bit of like making sure you're not breathing into your shoulders. Belly breathing is a common way to say it, but you don't want it all going out in your belly. That's going to be bad for a diastasis recti. That's going to put a lot of pressure down on the pelvic floor, which you don't want either. So it really kind of, you take those 2-3 minutes to do 5 or 6 good full exhales, full inhales, and then that should help it so that like when you do walk around the house, when you are stressed or all out into your belly isn't happening.
Right.
So it does give your body that room where when you do take an inhale, it should be 360, but it's not as exaggerated as, going through the full deep breath of inhale, exhale. But it will keep your body from breathing into your shoulders, breathing into your belly, hyperventilating. It allows your body room to breathe properly in that normal state.
Okay, wow. That's so cool. So cool. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense then. Okay. Because, I was thinking, like, it would probably take a long time for somebody to make that their natural breathing.
Right. So, no, it's more of like by taking that 2 or 3 minutes, and I love to pair it with a meditation too, just for that relax. But by doing that, think 6 breaths maybe at a time of exhaling till you feel like you're going to cough, inhaling past where you feel like you can inhale. Those things are going to do stuff like stretch your rib cage, and your ribs need to be able to move so that your shoulders don't hurt, so your neck doesn't hurt, so that you can have the good posture. So doing that big full inhale, exhale 2 or 3 times a day for 6 breaths at a time is going to make your natural state more what it should be, where the diaphragm and the pelvic floor are, lifting and working together, where your rib cage is at the right angle so your diaphragm can work optimally. So it turns into great breathing patterns on a daily basis and gets you out of some of those bad habits,
right,
without having to think about them. So instead of standing there being like, oh, I breathe into my shoulders, I got to stop doing that. Well, no, don't think of it that way. Just go practice, lay on your back, put your feet on the floor, on the wall, and practice that breathing. And then before you know it, you won't be breathing into your shoulders anymore.
Right. Okay. It's like it fades out on its own.
Yes. So it helps get that pattern correct without you having to think about it all the time. So it's kind of like that add mentality. Add the focused breathing pattern for, once or twice a day to start, and then maybe go to 3 or 4 times a day. And then the bad habits kind of weed themselves out. Instead of trying to like eliminate the bad habit and going cold turkey on the bad habit, that's not going to get the same result. So working through that breath will eliminate some of the bad habits, and it can even fix posture just by breathing. It can help fix leaking just by breathing and getting that pelvic floor to learn how to contract and relax. And then what also starts to happen is then when you go to like lift a kid or pick toys up, you're pairing that breath with those movements in the right way so that you don't leak when you cough, or you don't feel your back pain when you pick up your kid. So it ties into, those things without you having to think about it.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that. And it's nice to hear that it's like when you add something, other things fade out. It's the same way that I coach it in my practice too, is like instead of looking at, stopping all your bad habits, it's like let's just add in some really healthy ones, because you're going to notice that you really actually start to feel good, and that you maybe don't even need those unhealthier ones, or those ones that are not serving you in any way, and they just kind of fall off on their own.
Or even just like something like adding more vegetables. Sometimes that cuts down on your sweets craving because your body has all the nutrients now that it needs.
Yep,
So
exactly.
you don't even have to, like, it's not even like, oh, well, I feel good eating this, so I don't need the bad thing. It's more of just like, oh, I noticed I'm not craving sweets as often. I didn't think about that, you know, and it's just added a vegetable at breakfast or
yeah, exactly. And that's actually one of the first places I start with my clients is like, let's have a look at what's on your plate and where can we just add more vegetables? Where can we add more color and variety and fiber and whole foods to see how your body responds and to see what, you know, what drops off on that journey. Because a lot of the times, you're right, the food cravings that we have, the low energy, all of that, a lot of that can be solved just by giving our body the right nutrients that it needs to just function properly, right? Like I said, like 80% of our calories are through digestion and just breathing and metabolic processes. Well, if you're not giving it the 80% that it needs, it's gonna struggle.
Right. Well, and too, like, even with food as well, it's by adding or taking the time to make the conscious effort that only takes a minute to say, I need to add a vegetable or I need to practice my breath. You're eliminating 2-3 times as much effort to stop the bad thing. You think about food or even going to work out, and you think about how much time it takes you to work yourself out of the excuse. Well, I can have the cookie because I did this. I can have the cookie because I did this. Or I can't have the cookie because I didn't do this, and I didn't do this, and I didn't do this. Or I can't do the workout because my back hurts, or whatever the case is. Where instead, if you're like, my back hurts, but I still need to move, let me practice 2 minutes of breath. And then your back might feel better, and you might go, oh, now I'm feeling good enough where, like, maybe I can go for a walk. And then that walk turns into heading to the gym. And slowly you start to add those good things instead of trying to make yourself crazy over convincing yourself not to have the bad thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it becomes easier. Like you actually end up getting excited about it, right? There's no longer excuses of like why you can't do it. It becomes the excuse of why you can't do other things, right? Like for example, like I run 3 times a week. Well, I don't schedule on those run days. I don't schedule anything before 10 a.m. Everything else goes around my run and not my run into everything else, right? And so it becomes the excuse around everything else. And that's what we really want with our healthy lifestyles, with that ideal around what your health looks like, is that your health is your high priority. It's your highest priority. And everything else in your life goes around that. And when we do that, we actually see really good results in everywhere else in our life. So it's not like you're trading one for another. You're actually elevating in all areas.
Yes. And I think too, other people notice. So, you know, like for me, my mental state is so different if I don't get a workout in, whether it's strength training or running. If I go a few days without a workout, like even my husband's like, have you worked out recently? You know, like,
I'm the same way.
You know, like, and like, so people around you notice, you know, even in high school, the joke with my friends was, you need to run a lap, go run a lap, because like I was getting crazy. And it's like, so other people are affected by that as well. And same with the good. So, oh, you must have had a really great run today. You know, like you're just high on life today. Like what happened, you know, or food, same thing. People will notice that you have more energy, that you're happier, you know. So it's not just for you, it's everybody around you will say something. Once the habits are there and laid down, people will notice the difference.
100%. And I think as moms, it's important to remember too that any behavior you engage in, whether it positively or negatively affects your health and your life, is modeled behavior for your children. And a really great example of that is on the days where I'm not running, I go for morning walks. And those walks are 30 to 60 minutes long. Again, Everything else is scheduled around my walk. It's a non-negotiable. It has to happen for me. But because I've been so committed to that, this little one over here, she's 7. She chooses to walk the 2 kilometers to school rather than me driving her, which takes 5 minutes. And so that's a choice. Like, she has chosen to do that. And that's because I have modeled the behavior of, like, I go for a walk every morning. It feels good for me. It helps me feel good. It helps me be happy. It means I can come back and not be this, like, miserable monster mom in the mornings. Like, I have time for myself. I can think, I can process, I can plan. You know, as an entrepreneur and a workaholic too, like, there's a component there where it's like my brain is always thinking about my practice and my clients and my job and everything that I want to be doing, even when I'm, you know, in my home life. So there's always that push and pull as an entrepreneur of where you're spending your time and energy. And when it draws on you and it creates friction in other areas of your life where you want to be happy, like it was for me, it was becoming a problem. And so my walks have allowed me that space to be separate and to not be mom, not be Jen, not be the nutritionist. I could be who I want to be, or just be. I can just be, right? And so because I've been modeling that behavior, she chooses, even though we're now in Canadian winters and it's like, you know, -10 some days, and it's only the beginning. But she's making the choice to do that. And so it's exciting because you'll get more excited about your habits when you start to see how excited other people get about your habits to join you on them.
Yes. Yep. And my kids do the same thing. Like, they see me eating vegetables at breakfast and my daughter asks for peppers, you know, or I don't say like, okay, I'm going to go train you in the gym. They're asking, Mommy, when can I go to the gym with you? When can you train me? When can I work out with you? You know,
I love that.
I'm not pushing it at all. They're asking. And
yeah.
Because even though most of my workouts happen before they're even awake, but they still know I'm doing it. And they're like, Mommy, I want to work out with you. Mommy, get me in the gym.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's not super productive at 7 and 4, but they're asking. And
yeah.
I'm trying to oblige because it's just going to set them up for success later.
Exactly. And you know, children have wavering interests too, right? So I know this is like a side topic, but if they're interested, like, lean into it, because the more positive that interest is fed, or the more positively they experience it, the more likely it will become a habit for them, right? Like, remember, we're either chasing pleasure or we're running from pain. So if this is a pleasurable experience for your kids where it is you know, free for them to explore and trial and kind of just, even like you said, like, it doesn't have to be productive. The idea is that they're showing up with the intention of trying, which even for ourselves, you know, if you just show up with the intention of trying, of being consistent versus being perfect, 100% you're going to get closer to where you want to be than if you tried to get it perfect every time.
Well, that's also like the 10-minute rule in fitness. Give yourself 10 minutes of the workout. After 10 minutes, if you're still not feeling it, call it.
Yeah.
After 10 minutes, 90% of the time, you're going to be excited to keep going.
Those endorphins are great.
Yeah. If you're not, then you absolutely call it and listen to your body. But
yeah,
90% of the time, you are going to want to keep going.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, like the endorphins will kick in, which are feel-good hormones. They shut off the part of your brain that's trying to talk you out of it. They also help lower like the cortisol levels, which have you feeling like you've got more important things to do. Like, a lot of times for women, we're always trying to figure out, well, where do I spend my time? You know, I've got a list that never ends, and where do I fit this in because I have all these things that need to be done. And like, so sometimes we talk ourselves out of it because we're like, well, something else is more important right now. And that might be the case, but if that's always the case, then you're likely listening more to your excuses than just trying. Right. And yeah, so like, once we get those endorphins going, it's a lot easier to turn off that negative excuse pattern that's saying like, nope, this is too hard. I don't want to do it. This is me running away from the pain of committing, right?
Right.
And then we're there and we're like, okay, this is great. I'm glad I did this.
Yes. Yeah. For sure. So yeah, I mean, even with breathing, like start with that because you will feel different. You will see some strength changes. And then eventually you're going to go, okay, now what? How can I advance this? What's next?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important too that we understand, because we do tend to overcomplicate things, you should know that if it feels boring for you, you're doing it right. Like, I know that's what people don't want to hear because we crave that dopamine hit of
Right.
something new and exciting. And again, like, that's another hormone that perpetuates whether we're going to engage in something. But if it's boring, it's because you're doing it right. It's because you're showing up for the consistency. And like you said, at some point, it'll become automatic. And that's when we get to the level of like, how can I make this more interesting? Because you're not talking yourself out of it, because you're doing it consistently, because it's become part of your second nature of just doing, it's just the way you live your life. Now you're at a place and a point where you can be like, okay, let's make this a little bit more complicated.
Right.
Let's take it up a step, right? So if it feels boring for you, you're doing it right. I promise you.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the same is true with workouts for sure. You know, don't go crazy. You know, you've got to work towards being able to advance it, but you have to have that foundation first. And
Yeah.
boring is a great word for it.
Yes, yes. Yes. And it's funny because that has been, I feel like, the theme of my life for the last year and a bit, where it feels boring because it has become such a part of my day-to-day, like all the, the micro commitments that I've committed to over the years. And I was actually recently asked, how come I don't share, my hormone journey or like my hormone lifestyle on social media? And I was like, because it's boring. They're like, well, no, it's not. I'm like, oh, it's not. You're right. Like, I'm doing it right. It's boring for me. But for everybody who's not there yet, that's not boring, right? And so we will all come to levels of our commitment where what you're doing is boring and it feels like something that, isn't inspiring, or that you shouldn't be sharing, or, that you shouldn't be talking about. But the reality is that those are the exact things you need to be sharing and talking about and encouraging and inspiring to others, because those aren't, if they're boring for you, somebody hasn't committed to them yet, those are exactly where they need to be.
Yes. And that's a good just example in general of like, what are you posting on Instagram? Do you feel like you're being repetitive? Do you feel like you're being boring? Do you feel like it's the same content over and over again? Then great, you're probably on the right track. Well, I mean, you might be on a bad track with bad habits that are the same and repetitive, but it gives you the idea of, okay, I'm doing something the same all the time. What is that thing?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep. That's exactly it. Yeah. Because like what I share on my social media is like, it's a lot of, what to do or how to do or helping you understand why. But then I realized like, oh, like I don't even show like what I'm doing. Like,
Right.
because for the last, year and a half, at least, it's been super boring for me. And it's just, I'm like, oh, nobody wants to see this. Nobody wants to see that. And, I was talking with a friend recently and I was saying how, I do this and I do that. And she's like, what? I need to see this. I need to know more. And I'm like, oh, right.
Right.
This is the boring that we need to be talking about.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a good way, like, to reflect on things too. Like, pretend you're looking at your Instagram. What are you seeing? What are the things that are coming up over and over again? Does that need to be adjusted?
Yeah.
Or is it right on track? Look at
Yeah.
your life for a minute, just like your Instagram, and what would other people benefit from? What are you needing to adjust? And what's coming up all the time?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. I love that analogy. Because it's so true.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that this was really, really good. And I love to show that connection because I think a lot of what you are preaching is very similar to the same things that I do. Yours is just the hormones and mine is physical, but as women, we need to understand that none of this is super complicated. None of this is ridiculous. It's all just comes down to small, simple steps, the basics. Everything that like you're going through hormonally can be applied to other aspects of your life. So if you're doing those habits to fix your hormones, they're the same habits that you can then apply physically. So
yeah.
And I don't mean like, okay, I'm going to eat spinach and then I'm going to be strong. I mean like the small things like.
Well, Popeye says differently, but yes.
But like, you know, you're thinking of the small step, the foundation.
Yeah.
The same way that you attack changing the hormones is going to be the same way you start a fitness program or
exactly.
healing your body. Thinking about it from the inside out is a whole different perspective, but it works for both of us.
Yeah.
And I think as women, life is so complicated, but these things don't need to be. And you can see the connection between both of us and how we're helping people is very similar, and it's not overcomplicated like the rest of life and motherhood.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Honestly, I would say the most complicated part of it is really just knowing that these are issues to begin with, right? Because these are not basics that we're taught about ourselves, that they're not, you know, there isn't a woman 101 class, and really there should be. Like, we are such complicated creatures. There really honestly should be. But when it comes down to it, even if you didn't know any of that, if you just came down to being very basic, very simple, and very consistent with healthy habits, which we already know what the healthy habits are. Like, we already know what we should be doing. But if we just get very consistent, really good at doing it consistently, we will see huge changes. And that in itself is super simple and super impactful.
Right. And keeping it small, you know, it doesn't need to be this big dramatic change
exactly
at one time.
Yeah.
And like, I think you touched on it really early, is like that one little thing can change 10 other things very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be all or nothing. It doesn't need to be big and dramatic. It doesn't
exactly.
even be something that everybody notices right away.
Yep.
Doesn't need to be the walks every day, you know, where people are noticing you're gone for 15, 20 minutes. It just needs to be, you know, whether it's drinking more water, just simply drink more water.
Yep, exactly.
Nobody's going to notice a difference. You will, but that's not a big thing right out of the gate.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly it, is that, like you said, like, one thing could change 10. So why start with 5 things?
Right.
like I love just like, let's start with one thing. Let's see how it goes. And then let's layer onto that based on what's left for you to address. Right? Like, why try and hit, it's like throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks. That doesn't work. Like, start with one thing, one little rock in your pond, make those ripples, see what's left. Throw another rock and keep going. Like, that is the simplest way to do it. And you're right. Like, we overcomplicate it, and we're perfectionists. 100% we do it all the time in all areas of our lives, but especially our health. Just start with one habit, like one tiny thing. Like you said, like breathing, 5-6 minutes a day, 5-6 proper breaths, really intentional and consistent every day, and you will see changes. Yeah. And when that gets so boring that it is a part of your lifestyle, add one more thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think just seeing that commonality is really key, because then I think it feels more doable, manageable.
100%. Yeah, for sure. Even my coaching model is one bite at a time. And it's literally, that's actually the model that I taught myself with on this journey of, I don't have to be perfect. I have to look at what's at the end of my fork right here, right now, and just figure out, is this bite that I'm about to take going to put me closer to my goal or not? Because in the beginning, my journey was just nutrition. Like, over the years, it has evolved, but it was just nutrition. And that was literally the mantra that I repeated to myself is 1 bite at a time. I'm going to only do this with 1 forkful at a time. And whether this forkful is going to be the one that changes my life or not, I don't care. I'm just going to be consistent about it. And when we break it down to that simple, like that micro little decision, everything else is just a lot easier.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I love it. I think that this was a really great conversation, and hopefully some people got something out of it. I did, so.
Yes, me too, actually. I really like the zipper analogy. Now I'm going to be laying in bed tonight trying to like watch the zipper and the jacket.
I think it's a great, yeah, I think this was just so great, and I think, thank you for coming on live with me. And hopefully, if anybody has questions, you can reach out to either one of us at any time. Do you have any closing statements? Or, I mean, I think we talked about a lot, so.
We covered a lot, for sure. Yeah, I think I would just close it up with saying, that what you're experiencing might be common, but it's not normal. And there are a lot of resources available to you for whatever it is that you're dealing with in your health or what your goals are. And of course, Jen and I are both here to support you in that where we can. But definitely getting support in your journey is really important, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know the next steps, you can stall very quickly and your brain can easily fall back into old habits. So having support in your journey is so crucial to success, because the pathway is laid out. You just have to follow it.
I love it. I feel like I'm hearing myself. So those are the same things that I say too. So especially it's common but not normal.
Yeah.
And I also want to just say for everybody out there too, there's no wrong time. It doesn't matter, especially for postpartum exercise. I get all the time like, well, I'm not postpartum anymore. I'm like, well, you had a baby, you're postpartum. It doesn't matter if your baby is 30. We can still fix some of this. It might take longer because you've now added years of bad habits, but it's never too late. And you may not have a perfect time, but there is no wrong time to start.
Yep.
So
100%.
You just got to start, and don't worry about being too late, because there is no such thing. These things can be fixed. They can be helped. And like you said, especially if you have the expert helping you, you don't know what you don't know. So let us figure it out. Let us help you troubleshoot. And there is no perfect time, and it's never too late.
Yeah, that's right. And even on the perfect time, if your timing right now feels super overwhelming and anxiety inducing, this is probably the perfect time. This is the time where you need it the most. This is where your body is most dysregulated, where it needs the most support. That is, the worst time is actually the best time for you to start your journey. Because your brain is already going to be trying to run away from that pain and that discomfort. So learning a new habit in that environment is actually easier. And B, because it will be reinforced with good with good feelings, it actually now seeks the pleasure of those new habits that you're learning and doing. So what feels like the worst time is actually most usually the best time for you to give it a try. So yeah, if you're sitting there thinking like, but this is the worst time for me, no, that's why you need it.
Yep, and that's mostly when I get most of my clients. They're in the most amount of pain. They've tried everything. They cannot figure it out. So even in fitness, same thing. If you are like feeling completely defeated, everything hurts, now is probably when you should reach out and get help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, again, thank you so much. I think this was wonderful. And again, if anybody has any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Even if you ask a question to me that Jen can help, I will send it her way, vice versa.
Vice versa, yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. I know some of this stuff is really vulnerable for people too. We are not judging you. We just want to help you. We've both been where you are. And we hate to see other people feel the way we did. So we're trying to help, and there's zero judgment. So hopefully you guys learned something today, and I really appreciate you joining me, and have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys soon.
Yes. Bye, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.